Today I'm going to talk about Mini Z gear diff versus ball diff. It's also called a differential if you're new. This is on the rear axle. It's what transfers power from the engine pinion gear to the axle. In the front we have the stock gear diff, also called a mechanical diff. It has 3 planetary gears inside that rotate, and I'll show you how those operate a little bit later on. But that's what comes stock. In the back here we have a EXPIOWA ball diff. I also have a PN diff that I'll show you later. PN is another manufacturer if you're not familiar with the manufacturers of the components for these cars yet. Okay, we're going to start off first with the stock gear differential. It's also called a mechanical differential, and they all act exactly the same. They operate the same regardless of whether you have the EXPIOWA ball diff, the PN ball diff. They all work the same, and there is a difference in gearing. The EXPIOWAs all have the same number of teeth on the spur gear. The PN has a little bit finer cut gear, and I think they may mesh a little bit better. It just depends on what you want to race. They come with different gearing, but we're not going to worry about gearing right now. We're going to mainly worry about the stock gear diff versus the ball diff today. One of the differences you'll find out right away is obviously the stock pieces are made of plastic. This is the retainer that holds the inside of the hub for your left side of the car, and it's got a groove that it goes into so that it won't spin on there. It is basically locked in place on the axle, and then once the wheel goes on it, it won't spin because of these little ears that stick out, and they lock into the sides of the rim. But anyway, they both work the same. This one has a little bit different unit, and you can see there that it has a set screw, and this is made of metal. It's a machine piece. It's very close tolerances, machined very, very finely, and it is going to be the more true of the two. This is a molded plastic piece. It is not machined. However, it is fairly good. I've not seen really any wobble from them, either one, but I just have to believe that a machine piece is going to be even tighter tolerances than something that was molded out of plastic. The main difference when you're driving the car comes on the other end. This is a completely plastic unit other than the axle itself and a little retainer clip inside that holds the whole thing together. But one thing you'll notice with a stock unit is you get wobble. Okay, I'm going to hold that axle, and you can see that it does allow the wheel to wobble back and forth, actually in an entire circle. But this is not something you want on your car. With a ball diff being metal parts, there's no wobble at all. There's no play. When I move this, when I bend it, it does not move. And the reason why this is important is when you're going down a straightaway or even through a corner, your rear tires act as a rudder. Same as a rudder on a boat, but it's fixed in the straightforward position. And where this becomes important is when you start going through a corner, the last thing you want to have happen is have your wheel turn a few degrees in either direction. If you were to scale that up to a full-size car and your wheel had that much play at the right rear corner, it'd be a very uncomfortable ride. When you have a ball diff with metal components, there's no play in that whatsoever, and essentially you now have 2 rudders that go in the same exact direction. I've noticed this is true regardless of the manufacturer. This is another one of my ball diffs, you can see, and it's a tight unit. It does not wobble at all. These are both EXPIOWA, and the PN one, the gear does have some play, but the axle shaft itself is very finely machined. In fact, I think it's probably a little bit better piece. It's got a ball bearing in there that keeps everything true and spinning properly. But this is true. I've checked it on all of my mechanical diffs. See that wobble? Just a little bit. But that couple degrees will cost you some handling. See that? That one's even worse. And this is fine. You won't really notice this too much on a stock class. This is a stock LM 102mm car, and if you're running a stock engine in a 6 or 7 tooth pinion, the speed isn't really that great to where this is going to matter too much. But when you start getting into an 8 tooth with a PN50, similar to this car, this is a PN chassis. I love this car. It's ridiculously fast. With the PN50, you will notice if this moves at all, when you're powering it through a corner, it's going to experience a lot more cornering load, higher speeds, and if you have both wheels tracking true, acting like a rudder to keep the back end straight, it's going to be a lot better ride through that corner. You'll notice a lot of times, you always wonder why your car turns better to the right than it does the left at high speed. Well, that's because on every Kyosho that I've seen, the left side wheel's pretty good. This one has a bit of, just maybe barely moves, but the left side is pretty good, and that's the corner, that's the side taking the force as the car turns. If you're turning right, however, I'm sorry, if you're turning left and you're on a wheel that can do this, the back end can kind of do a little bit of whatever it wants, and it's now relying for true straightness on the inside corner that's now been lightened due to the fact that we're turning and putting load on the right hand side. And viewed from the back, you can see that it allows the wheel to tip a bit. A PN ball diff or a Kyosho ball diff will not allow that wheel to tip. It stays, this is the right here, this is the Kyosho ball diff. It will not allow that wheel to tip at all because it holds it directly true on the axle. So that's the main difference between them. Do I recommend getting a ball diff? If your rules allow it, sure, and you've got the money for it. They're kind of expensive. This differential here was about $50. My PN diff, I've got about, I want to say about $55 in it. We race a spec class up in Madison, Wisconsin at Trax Hobbies, and they require this gear and the orange 10 tooth. So it's a bit pricier, but it is a very, very good ball diff. The reason not to get a ball diff is, like I said, the price is very expensive. If you're running in a 7-tooth class and you've got stock engines, it really doesn't matter that much. You'll get a little bit better handling out of it, but you're not really leaning too hard on the tires through corners because the speeds are going to be a little bit lower. But yeah, it'll help you a little. But if you're on a budget, skip it. There's other things that you could get more performance out of, like T-plates. They're cheaper and you might experience a little bit better result from that. But I don't know of any track I've raced at yet that will allow a ball diff in the stock class. This ball diff will put you up into the modified class pretty much anywhere you go. So be aware of the rules for where you're going to race. And that's all I have for you today. Hope it helps. And we'll see you on the track.